Hey everyone, it's James with Dakota Spotlight. I've got good news for you. Season 12 is coming soon, and I'm really excited about it. I've been working hard here behind the scenes, and just recently I finally landed an important interview I've been waiting on. That was a big step, and I can't wait to share this story with you. In the meantime, I want to share an episode from another podcast. It's called Truer Crime, hosted by Celicia Stanton. Each month, she focuses on one case with thought-provoking details, looking not only at the crime itself, but also the history and culture around it. It's a different take on true crime, and you'll hear one of their episodes right now.
Please be aware that today's episode contains a very brief reference to stalking. Please take care while listening. In the summer of 2018, I was 23 years old. A baby, really. Just a year and a half out of college. I spent my days coaching debate and taking photos, my evenings driving around town with my friends. I was obsessed with Taylor Swift, back when it was a little less cool to admit that. Life at that time just felt so wide open, like all the possibilities were still ahead of me. That same summer, Mollie Tibbetts was 20, a rising sophomore at the University of Iowa, just a state away. She loved kids, loved running, loved blasting music in the car with her best friend. She shared my obsession with Taylor Swift, and life should have stretched out ahead of her, too. But by midsummer, everything had changed. Maybe you remember the headlines, the missing posters, the photos of a smiling girl with long dark hair and bright brown eyes, but what you probably don't remember is what happened after. Not just to her family, but to her community, to a teenager left behind, and to a country desperate to make Mollie into a symbol she never asked to be.
It has been 4 days since Mollie Tibbetts disappeared.
Mollie Tibbetts.
Mollie Tibbetts.
Despite search efforts over the last few days, there is still no sign of that missing woman.
There has been a massive investigation underway in this tiny, tiny town.
Everybody was just baffled about what could have happened to this girl.
You never think, it's going to be in your small town. It's going to be someone you know on a missing poster.
Everybody in this community is fighting to get her back.
Looking into this story, I kept getting stuck on the same questions. Ones that kept pulling me deeper. What happens when your daughter becomes a headline? What happens when your grief becomes someone else's message? Those are the questions that we'll be digging into today, because this is the story of Mollie Tibbetts. I'm Celicia Stanton, and you're listening to Truer Crime. There's a garage on the east side of Brooklyn, Iowa. Plain and unassuming, it's rigged with a few grainy security cameras facing out towards the street. They capture this stretch of road, a blur of fields, a couple of houses, the kind of footage you'd never think to review, unless you were looking for something. On July 18th, 2018, at 7:48 p.m., a figure flickers into the corner of the screen. A young woman jogging, her ponytail bouncing with each step. It's Mollie Tibbetts. Brooklyn, Iowa is a town of under 2,000 people. Small, tight-knit, but not so small that everyone knows everyone. The man who owned the camera didn't know Mollie, but he'd probably seen her before, jogging past like she did many nights. She knew the route by heart. According to Dateline, there was even a stretch where she could see her grandparents' farm in the distance. She'd moved to Brooklyn in the 3rd grade, made fast friends, and dove into activities. She was a cross-country runner, an honor student. Like me, she participated in her school's speech team. Mollie had just finished her freshman year at the University of Iowa. In college, she'd gotten into theater and the school's dance marathon scene. The summer of 2018, she was spending her days working at an elementary school day camp. And when it came to kids, she was a natural. Fun, bright, playful. That day, she'd worked her usual shift. Her boss later told Dateline she was her typical goofy self, laughing and snapping silly selfies with a coworker's phone when they weren't looking. Totally in her element. At 5 p.m., her brother picked her up from work and dropped her off at her boyfriend Dalton Jack's house. Dalton was out of town working on a construction job for the summer, and Mollie had agreed to stay there and dog sit while he was away. At some point after getting to the house, Mollie had changed into a pair of black running shorts and a pink sports bra, her Fitbit already fastened to her wrist. It was still light out, warm, summery, just before sunset. Before she left, she messaged Dalton and texted her mom that she'd swing by for dinner after her run. She never did, though. Sometime that evening, Mollie's phone silenced a notification, a Snapchat from her cousin Morgan. As Morgan told Dateline, the two were especially close, like sisters, and their Snapchat streak was killer. They'd gone 2 years without breaking it. But Mollie's reply would have to wait. She'd always put her phone on Do Not Disturb during her runs, and Morgan knew that. Mollie's runs were her time. At 7:48, the garage camera caught her running by. And just 28 seconds later, a black Chevy Malibu appeared. Chrome door handles, shiny mirror covers, rims that caught the light. The car slid by, disappearing from view. At 8:02, though, it circled back. Maybe the driver had gotten turned around? But then it passed again and again. 6 passes in total. 14 cars drove by the camera that night, but nearly half of them were the Malibu. It appeared to be following Mollie, circling her over and over again. At 7:56, local hairdresser Christina Stewart passed Mollie on her way to feed her family's horses. She recognized her instantly. She'd cut Mollie's hair for years. That was the last known sighting. The Malibu kept circling. The next morning was warm and clear. A storm had rolled through the night before, but didn't leave much behind. It was the makings of a good day. According to Rolling Stone, Mollie's mom, Laura Calderwood, had just wrapped up her shift at the grocery store. She stopped by the library, picked up a magazine. That's when her phone rang. It was her son, Scott. "Mom," he said, "Mollie didn't show up for work today." Panic hit instantly. Mollie was responsible. She didn't just not show up. It wasn't like her. Laura thought back to the night before, the text saying Mollie would come by after her run. She'd never shown up, but Laura hadn't thought much of it. Maybe Mollie had gotten tired and something else had come up. They'd talk later. But this wasn't like Mollie. Her boss had already called Morgan, Mollie's cousin, the one she was practically glued to. And Morgan knew immediately that something was off. They texted constantly. They had that 2-year Snapchat streak going. That streak was about to break. That's when the phone calls started. Friends, family, no one had seen Mollie. No one had heard from her since the night before. A group drove over to Dalton's house. Mollie had to be there, right? She was watching the dog. Maybe she was sleeping, or maybe something had happened to her phone. But when they got to the house, their fears intensified. Mollie wasn't there. Her dad, Rob Tibbetts, spoke to Iowa Local 5 News about how he struggled to make sense of the situation.
It's very concerning, but you sort of assume it's some kind of a miscommunication, that they had only just discovered that she was missing. And so you sort of assume she's going to turn up right away at a friend's house or something, and it's all just a miscommunication. But there's this sort of sick feeling that goes on into the evening, and you realize that she's missing.
At 5:56 p.m. on July 19th, less than 24 hours after she was last seen, Laura made the call to police. Mollie Tibbetts was officially a missing person. By the next morning, Brooklyn had mobilized. According to Dateline, hundreds of volunteers showed up on a weekday. People combed through fields on ATVs, helicopters scanned overhead. Brooklyn had fewer than 2,000 people, and it felt like every single one of them was out searching.
400 people woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and showed up unprompted and conducted a search on their own. You think your daughter is a remarkable person, and then when you see that kind of outpouring, then you realize that other people know that too. She's so outgoing and she's so poised, and she's a leader in her peer group. And so that's why I think they turned out.
Even Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds reached out to the family in those early days. She offered words of support, an expression of care from one parent to another. The whole state was watching, hoping. But in Brooklyn, something had shifted. Sheriff Thomas Kriegel told the Gazette that people who used to leave their doors unlocked now kept them closed. Parents stuck closer to their kids, neighbors who used to walk alone now walked in pairs. The town had always been quiet, safe. But now, it was holding its breath. Days passed without answers. Hundreds of volunteers combed through fields, woods, and gravel roads, but nothing. Mollie had vanished without a trace. So police turned to the only clues she might have left behind, digital ones. They knew she always wore her Fitbit. It wasn't found with her belongings, but investigators were able to pull the device's data remotely. They hoped her final run had been logged, but it wasn't. Still, they had something. A pattern. According to Dateline, the Fitbit stored past routes, and police searched those areas for any sign of disturbance. They ran background checks, looked into registered sex offenders, combed through the rafters, garages, and basements of nearby houses, but nothing. So, they turned to Mollie's phone. Like the Fitbit, it was missing, but her cloud backup gave investigators access to recent messages and activity. They dug in, but no leads, no clues, no strange texts, no plans to run away, no signs of a secret life, just nothing. But soon, the FBI joined the investigation, and that's when things took a turn. Agents used cell tower data to track Mollie's movements. Her phone had pinged towers throughout her run, each one offering a different breadcrumb of time, location, and speed. According to Iowa's News Now, between 8:15 and 8:28 p.m. on the night of her disappearance, Mollie's phone was moving east at about the pace of a 10-minute mile, a normal run. But then, it stopped. Until just 4 minutes later, it started moving again. Only now, it was heading south. And it was moving fast. 60 miles per hour. 15 minutes after that, her phone pinged for the last time. That signal came from just off Interstate 80, 15 miles outside of Brooklyn with direct access to a major highway. It was a gutting discovery. It meant Mollie hadn't just stopped running. She'd gotten into a car. Maybe she'd even been taken. And now she could be anywhere. The reality investigators were facing was bleak. Mollie was gone, the trail was cold, and the person responsible was still out there. So they started narrowing the list, ruling people out, chasing new leads, and trying to zero in on anyone who raised a red flag. Quickly, investigators cleared Mollie's boyfriend, Dalton Jack. He'd been out of town the night she disappeared, staying in a hotel 2 hours away with a coworker. According to Dateline, he seemed concerned but not panicked during his initial interview, and his alibi checked out. He was confirmed to be at a Walmart near the hotel that night, buying groceries. There wasn't much more to it. So, investigators looked elsewhere. And before long, their attention landed on a man named Wayne Cheney, a pig farmer. And on paper, at least, a troubling figure. According to Who 13, Wayne had pled guilty to stalking charges not once, but twice. The most recent, just 4 years before Mollie went missing. His farm sat on 70 acres, just 13 miles southeast of Brooklyn. And what made it all more unnerving was the cell tower data. The last ping from Mollie's phone had come from a spot just 200 yards away from Wayne's land. Police drove out to the property, and Wayne talked with them for over an hour. He was cooperative, even let them search the grounds, but nothing turned up. Still, investigators were wary. They asked him to take a polygraph. That, though, is where Wayne drew the line. He refused. Told the Des Moines Register the whole thing was stupid, that he didn't need a test to prove he had nothing to hide. Reading this, I couldn't blame him. Polygraph tests are notoriously unreliable. But eventually, Wayne changed his mind. I don't know if maybe he felt worn down by the request or maybe he felt for Mollie's family, but what I do know is that the polygraph changed nothing. There was still no evidence linking him to Mollie, and just like that, he was dropped as a suspect. But Wayne wasn't the only one under the microscope. Investigators were casting a wide net, and their next person of interest came from a state over. a place called Stanton, Nebraska. Just 2 days after Mollie vanished, a Nebraska man showed up at a small car dealership outside Brooklyn with a 1989 Mercury Grand Marquis. He told workers the transmission was acting up, but instead of waiting for repairs, he dropped $3,500 on a different car and took off. Before leaving, though, he made one last stop at the Mercury, grabbed a small bag, unscrewed the license plates, took both with him. He told the salesman he'd be back, but strangely, he didn't leave a callback number. Investigators' curiosity was piqued. Why ditch a car that just needed a few repairs? Unless you had other reasons to get rid of it. Then, a tip came in. A witness remembered seeing a suspicious vehicle near Mollie's house the night she disappeared. And the description? It matched the car left at the dealership perfectly. Elated at their luck, investigators went to examine the Grand Marquis, and there it was. Finally, something. A reddish stain on the back seat, and even more, several strands of hair, which they immediately sent to the lab for testing. It was the kind of discovery that jolted the case forward, at least for the moment. Investigators pulled the man's social media. He had 2 Facebook accounts. One was filled with likes of pages featuring young women, athletes, models, often wearing very little clothing. Not illegal, but maybe a bit unsettling. They really might have had their guy. They waited for the lab results. But when they came back, there was nothing. The hair didn't match Mollie. The stain wasn't her blood. And the man from Nebraska, like Wayne before him, was dropped as a suspect. Another lead gone cold. By now, Mollie's story had gone national. Her face was everywhere. And with that visibility came an avalanche of tips. Some were helpful, but most weren't. Just under 2 weeks after Mollie disappeared, County Sheriff Tom Kriegel told reporters they followed up on more than 200 leads. 2 weeks after that, investigators gave another update. That number had ballooned and now included upwards of 1,500 tips and more than 500 interviews. It was dead lead after dead lead, but as weeks wore on without any meaningful developments, the energy to find Mollie persisted. The search had become something larger than the case itself. It was personal. For the family, for the town, even for the press. According to the Washington Post, reporters had set up shop in Brooklyn. They transformed local spots into makeshift newsrooms. One cafe, the Classic Deli, became a kind of unofficial headquarters. Its free Wi-Fi and homemade pie fueling the coverage. CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz, reporting from Brooklyn that summer, could tell that something was different about this case.
This community has just been rallied around this search effort for Mollie Tibbetts. Her photo is wallpapered all around Brooklyn, Iowa. That's her hometown. There are missing posters on every storefront, sometimes 2 on a single storefront. People have signs in their yards, people wearing T-shirts with her photo on them and the phone number to call if anybody knows anything. It's something I've never seen before in my life.
And beneath all of that, the posters, the press, the pie-fueled stakeouts, was hope. Because Mollie hadn't been found. And there was no proof that she was gone. No body, no murder weapon, no concrete evidence she'd been killed. So maybe she was still out there. And that hope, it was energizing. Mollie's family pictured her returning to them safely, and that image gave them something to hold on to, something to plan for. Here's Mollie's dad, Rob Tibbetts, and her boyfriend, Dalton Jack, in an interview with the Des Moines Register.
We couldn't keep going if we didn't think she was coming home. We just talked about it for the last hour, how we thought she'd come home. And mostly we just talk about what we're going to do when she gets back. One of her brothers said yesterday that we're going to make her watch every one of these interviews back to back.
Slap the magnets we got on her car and make her wear the T-shirts.
And go pull every one of those flyers out of every store in the state of Iowa.
They were preparing for a reunion. And to help make that dream possible, Mollie's family launched a fundraising campaign. At an August press conference, her mother, Laura Calderwood, announced the creation of the Bring Mollie Home Safe Fund.
We believe that Mollie is still alive, and if someone has abducted her, we are pleading with you to please release her. We are partnering with Crime Stoppers of Central Iowa to help facilitate the process of receiving information anonymously that we can use to pay for her release or information that would lead to her location. As of 10 o'clock this morning, we have raised $172,000 that will be paid to you as soon as Mollie is safely home.
The number didn't stay at $172,000 for long. A few days later, this same reward fund had grown to more than $260,000, and less than 2 weeks after that, it had grown again, this time reaching nearly $400,000. People from across the country were contributing, sharing the posters, discussing the case. And in the town itself, reminders of Mollie were everywhere. Her name on flyers, her smile on shirts, her memory kind of just woven into the daily fabric of life. A reporter from the Des Moines Register asked Rob Tibbetts what it felt like, walking through Brooklyn, seeing the town decorated for Mollie's return. But as lovely as that all was, Rob knew that none of it mattered without the right lead.
It's encouraging that people are aware of it and that they're trying to show their concern. But what we need now is for people to go to that tip line, and with whatever small, insignificant piece of information that they might have, even a sense of something that was just a little bit wrong, they need to call. And if they have some suspicion about someone that they know, it may be a loved one, maybe a family member, they need to work up the courage to call and let the authorities sort that out. Because if people don't have anything to hide, then they have nothing to fear. And so we need to let the authorities sort that out. But Mollie's going to come home when somebody shares that information. There's absolutely no way in a community like Brooklyn that somebody didn't see or know something. And so we just need to get them to come forward.
They had no body, no murder weapon, not a single piece of evidence that could explain where Mollie was or who had taken her. And with more than 1,000 tips already logged, investigators were running out of new places to look. So, yeah, Mollie's dad was right. The case needed a break. A moment of clarity in what felt like an endless maze of maybes. They needed a witness. Someone that had seen what no one else could. And as it turned out, someone did see something. Although technically that someone wasn't a person at all. It was a machine. A quiet set of garage-mounted cameras installed by a local man at the edge of town, just a few blocks from where Mollie had last been seen. The cameras weren't high-tech, nothing fancy, but they'd been on the night Mollie disappeared, capturing a quiet stretch of road on the east side of Brooklyn. Of course, the cameras couldn't know they were watching something important. They weren't tuned to fear or urgency, they were just recording, blinking every few seconds, capturing light and motion and moments without knowing which ones would matter. 8 teams of investigators were assigned to review the footage, every frame, every flicker. It was slow, painstaking work. Hours of uneventful video, like the kind of material that dulls your eyes and makes you second guess what you've seen. Until there it was. Just 1.5 seconds long, a speck, a blur, a girl running, her ponytail bouncing. And this finding, I kept coming back to it, that the cameras remembered what we couldn't see. They didn't blink, they didn't forget, and they didn't look away. Mollie had been there, moving, alive, and she wasn't alone. Because just 28 seconds later, another figure entered the frame. Not a person, but a car. A black Chevy Malibu, chrome mirrors, shiny rims, circling, passing by again and again and again. The footage couldn't give them a name. It couldn't show a license plate or a face, but it captured it. And for a case with no witnesses, that meant everything. And so, in the absence of everything else, that detail became the case. But, of course, there's no database for tricked-out Malibus, so investigators turn to their most powerful tool, eyes on the road. The very next day, Deputy Steve Kivy was driving home from work when he saw it. A black Chevy Malibu, stopped on an off-ramp. The exact same make and model, the same chrome features, same simple silhouette. It was uncanny, too precise to be coincidence. So, Deputy Kivy pulled over, watched, waited to see where the car was going. The Malibu merged onto the highway and passed right in front of him, and Deputy Kivy pulled out and followed. He stayed close as the car turned west onto 2nd Street, then north into an alley. For a moment, he lost sight of it, but as he turned into the alley, there it was, parked. And the driver, already out of the car. Kivy got out and called after him.
The driver was already out of the vehicle, so I said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" And he turned around.
The man's name was Christian Bahena Rivera. He was 24 years old, said he worked nearby, that he didn't speak much English. Said, yeah, he'd heard about the missing girl. Who hadn't? He wasn't nervous. He gave his name and his phone number, let the deputy take a photo of him and his car. The conversation was short, uneventful, and yet it would change everything. Because that car, the black Chevy Malibu with chrome mirrors, it wasn't just a match for the one on the footage. It was the car on the footage. And the man driving it, he had more to say. Not that day, but soon. And what he shared would unravel everything investigators thought they knew and lead them to something that no one wanted to find. That's next time on Truer Crime. Hey, real quick, before you go, I want to talk about action items. If this is your first time listening, something you should know is that I don't just want to tell stories. I want us to do something about them. Because, listen, I know that feeling we all get. You finish an episode and you're just kind of left sitting with it. Grief, anger, questions, and the urge, at least for me, and I know for many of you, to do something. And I feel like that feeling, it's this wonderful, beautiful thing because it's a sign of your humanity. So each week, I'll offer a tangible way to channel that feeling into action. And this week, we're honoring Mollie. Before she disappeared, she was this joyful, creative, big-hearted 20-year-old. She studied psychology, she worked with kids, she performed on stage. And so when she went missing, her family really wanted to honor all of who she was. So that's why they created the Mollie Tibbetts Memorial Fund for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which supports mental health programs at the University of Iowa's Children's Hospital. The fund has already helped expand art and music therapy, provided holiday gifts for kids in treatment, and grown other critical support programs. If you'd like to learn more or donate, the link's in the show notes, or you can just search Mollie Tibbetts Memorial Fund and you'll find it. As always, you can find a full list of today's sources and action items at truercrimepodcast.com. And if you want to keep in touch between episodes, Truer Crime is on Instagram and X at truercrimepod, and you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at Celicia Stanton, and through my weekly newsletter, Sincerely Celicia, at sincerelycelicia.substack.com. Thanks for being here. Truer Crime is created, hosted, and written by me, Celicia Stanton, and is a production of Tenderfoot TV in association with Odyssey. Additional writing, research, and production by Olivia Husingfeld. Executive producers are myself, Donald Albright, and Payne Lindsay. Editing by Liam Luxon. Artwork by Station 16. Original music by Jay Ragsdale and Makeup and Vanity Set. Mix by Dayton Cole. Thank you to Oren Rosenbaum and the team at UTA, the Nord Group, and the team at Odyssey. For more podcasts like Truer Crime, search Tenderfoot TV on your favorite podcast app or visit us at tenderfoot.tv. Thanks for listening.